Victoria Hamilton's Tesla Model S glided silently into the circular driveway of her Malibu mansion at 2 in the morning. Returning from Silicon Valley after 4 days of billion-dollar merger negotiations, she only wanted to give a goodnight kiss to little Emma sleeping, but froze when she heard desperate sobs coming from her room. Through the cracked door, she saw Marcus, the black janitor from Detroit, sitting on the bed with a bottle of medicine in his hand, while Emma lay motionless, pale as wax. Her blood ran cold when she saw Marcus remove what she discovered was a wig, revealing a head devastated by chemotherapy. The man whispered words of forgiveness in broken English, while pouring the expensive pills into the nightstand, not stealing them but storing them, then pulled out another identical bottle from his pocket. The words that followed paralyzed her. He had sold his bone marrow and a kidney to buy those medicines, sacrificing his own dying body to save Emma. When the girl opened her eyes, calling him Papa Marcus, Victoria understood she was witnessing something that would destroy all her certainties about family, about her dead husband, and about the man she thought was just a cleaning service employee. The Hamilton estate slept in the muffled silence of the Malibu night when Victoria returned from yet another business trip that had kept her away for 4 days. The $5 billion acquisition she had just closed in Palo Alto should have filled her with satisfaction, but a strange uneasiness had accompanied her throughout the entire flight back, a premonition she couldn't define. She entered silently through the service entrance, a habit she'd developed over the years to avoid disturbing Emma's sleep, her 8-year-old daughter, who represented everything she had left of Michael. Her husband had died of leukemia 3 years earlier, the same disease that now slowly consumed Emma. Though the world's best oncologists and outrageously expensive experimental treatments seemed to keep it under control, the intention was simple: go up to the child's room, give her a kiss on the forehead as she always did when returning at night, then collapse in her own bed until morning. But as she climbed the marble stairs from Italy that she'd had installed to impress guests she rarely invited, a sound stopped her. Muffled sobs, desperate ones, were coming from Emma's room. Terror paralyzed her for an instant. Through the cracked door, she saw a scene she would never forget. Marcus Washington, the janitor from Detroit she had hired 6 months earlier through a cleaning service recommendation, was sitting on the edge of Emma's bed. His body shook with sobs as he held in his trembling hands the bottle of Emma's medicines, the experimental venetoclax that cost $20,000 per box, a fortune she could afford without problems, but that for most people would be unreachable. Her first reaction was blind rage. She was about to burst into the room when she saw Marcus make a gesture that stopped her. With slow and deliberate movement, the man removed what Victoria had always believed was his thick, graying hair. It was a wig. Underneath, his head was completely bald, with the unmistakable marks of aggressive chemotherapy. The man gently placed the wig on the nightstand and leaned over Emma, stroking her blonde hair with a tenderness Victoria had never seen in him during the months of service. Emma lay motionless, her breathing so light it was almost imperceptible, her face waxy in the weak moonlight filtering through the silk curtains. Marcus began to speak, mixing broken English with what sounded like street dialect from Detroit, evidently believing he was alone with the sleeping child. The words Victoria heard nailed her to the spot. The man confessed to having thought about stealing the medicines to send them to his son Jamal in Detroit, sick with the same genetic mutation of leukemia. But then he opened the bottle and, instead of pocketing the pills as Victoria expected, poured them all into the nightstand drawer where they were kept. From his work shirt pocket, he pulled out another identical bottle, full. The truth that emerged in the following minutes was heartbreaking. Marcus had sold part of his bone marrow to the medical black market that thrived in America's inner cities. He had sold a kidney to a clandestine clinic. He had sold sperm to fertility centers until the limit of physical endurance, all to get the money necessary to buy the medicines for Emma, while his son in Detroit had to settle for the standard treatments of the public health system. Victoria saw for the first time the marks on Marcus's body when he stood up swaying. The extreme weakness, the poorly hidden bandages on his side, the bruises from medical procedures, the skeletal thinness that his loose uniform could no longer disguise. This man was literally consuming himself, selling pieces of himself to save a child who wasn't even his daughter. The next revelation was even more shocking. Marcus pulled out from his shirt pocket a small, crumpled photo and kissed it. Victoria recognized it immediately. It was the photo Michael always kept in his wallet, taken during their last vacation in Martha's Vineyard before the disease struck him. Marcus began to tell, with a voice broken by emotion, how he had met Michael at the oncology clinic in Cedars-Sinai 3 years earlier. They had become friends during the long hours of chemotherapy, two fathers fighting parallel battles, Michael for himself, Marcus for his son Jamal. Before dying, Michael had made Marcus promise to look for Emma if he ever came to Los Angeles, to make sure she was okay, that she wasn't alone with a mother always absent for work. Marcus had kept the promise by presenting himself as a simple janitor 6 months earlier, when he learned from the news that the daughter of the famous Victoria Hamilton was sick with the same leukemia as Jamal. The initial intention was only to verify that Emma was well and leave. But when he had seen the child suffer, always alone while her mother traveled the world making more billions, something in him had broken, or perhaps mended. He had begun to care for Emma as if she were his daughter, staying with her during the night crises Victoria never even knew existed, singing her lullabies from the old Detroit when pain kept her awake, inventing games to distract her during the long days of solitude. Marcus confessed to the sleeping child that he had thought about stealing just 1 box of medicines for Jamal. Just one, which for Victoria wouldn't have made a difference, but could have given his son a few more months of life. But every time he tried, he saw Emma's smile, heard the child call him during nightmares, and couldn't do it. How could he steal life from one child to give it to another? So he had made the only possible decision in his moral universe distorted by pain and love: sacrifice himself to save both. Michael's money, because Victoria's husband had secretly opened an account for Jamal, would go to the son in Detroit. His body, sold piece by piece, would guarantee the medicines for Emma. The black market doctor had warned him he was crossing every limit, that his body already compromised by cancer wouldn't hold much longer after what he had done to himself. Marcus knew it and had accepted 2 or 3 months of life, maybe less, in exchange for the certainty that Emma would have enough medicine to complete the treatment cycle. It was at that moment that Emma opened her eyes. She wasn't sleeping, or maybe Marcus's movements had woken her. She looked at the man with those blue eyes identical to Michael's and said 2 words that changed everything: Papa Marcus. Marcus burst into tears, hugging the child, and Victoria understood she had witnessed something that went beyond her understanding. As an absent mother and successful billionaire, she had before her a man who loved her daughter more than she herself had ever been capable of loving, a man who was dying in silence for a love he didn't even have the right to claim. Victoria's entrance into the room paralyzed Marcus, who staggered, terrified. The contact when she supported him revealed a devastated body, extremely light, feverish, consumed by clandestine procedures. Emma instinctively hugged Marcus instead of her mother, painful revelation of Victoria's absence in her daughter's life. Marcus stammered justifications in broken English. Terrified, Emma revealed she had known everything all along. The nighttime calls with Jamal, the muffled crying. She had even learned that some Detroit slang meant, "I love you." Marcus then showed the evidence that shocked Victoria. Photos of Michael with him at Cedars-Sinai Clinic, 2 sick fathers united by chemotherapy. An audio file revealed the final secret. Michael had hidden $500,000 for Jamal, tormented by the injustice of having treatments denied to other children only because of poverty. The recording revealed an unknown Michael who had bribed a nurse to give Marcus the real drug instead of placebo in the clinical trial. Marcus confessed he had initially come to steal medicines for Jamal, but seeing Emma alone and abandoned while Victoria always traveled, paternal instinct had prevailed. The breaking point was when Emma, in a violent crisis, had called him Papa. Since then, stealing was impossible. His body, condemned by cancer, became the only way to save both. Victoria's private jet took off for Detroit at dawn, with a medical team monitoring Marcus, who had collapsed during the night. Emma wouldn't leave his side, speaking in that impossible mix of English and Detroit slang she had secretly learned. Jamal's apartment in Detroit was a slap to reality. 5th floor without elevator in a decaying building in the inner city. They found him hospitalized at Detroit Medical Center, a room with 6 sick children, his body devastated, but his brown eyes still fighting. The meeting between father and son needed no translations. Marcus literally dragging himself to the bed, the desperate embrace, words too fast to be understood. Emma shyly introduced herself as the West Coast sister in her rudimentary slang. When Jamal extended his skeletal hand and Emma took it, something new was born. Victoria immediately transferred Jamal to a private clinic. Same genetic mutation as Emma. Same experimental protocol that would save him if only they had had access before. That night, Marcus revealed the final piece.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
The clinical trial at Cedars-Sinai belonged to the same pharmaceutical company Victoria owned. Children used as control group, placebo instead of the real drug that already existed. Michael had discovered it and acted illegally to save Marcus. Victoria's pharmaceutical empire, built to save lives, had used sick children as statistics. The weeks at the UCLA Medical Center transformed 4 strangers into family. Victoria moved her office there, discovering for the first time that something more important than billions existed. Emma and Jamal developed their own language made of gestures and laughter, that instinctive understanding between children who have seen death too early. Marcus, finally freed from the secret of illness, found a serenity he had never had. Dr. Reynolds proposed a remote possibility: partial bone marrow transplant from Jamal. Now improving. Not a cure, but time. Months instead of weeks. Jamal decided immediately. His father had given him life. Now he could give back time. Emma insisted on donating her rare blood for transfusions. A program of activities for small patients was born spontaneously. Marcus directed from bed. The girls organized games and shows. Medical staff noted measurable improvements in mood and therapy response. The day of the transplant, in a Los Angeles covered with spring rain, Victoria prayed for the first time, not to the God of billionaires, but to that of the desperate who ask for just one more day. The transplant worked partially, giving Marcus what doctors called a window of opportunity, time to see his girls heal. The following months were an alternation of small victories and sudden crises. Marcus had days when he walked in the mansion's garden, and others when he seemed on the verge of fading away. But a fierce determination kept him anchored to life until his girls were safe. Jamal flourished completely under treatments, going from terminal patient to teenager who could run and dream. He and Emma were inseparable, slept in the same bed, creating fantastic worlds, filling the mansion with life. The deepest transformation was in Victoria. The woman who measured everything in billions now counted days in smiles, in chaotic dinners where 4 people united by destiny pretended normalcy. During a summer crisis, Marcus whispered he wasn't afraid. He had seen more than he hoped. Victoria accelerated legal preparations. Adoption of Jamal. Creation of the Michael Marcus Foundation with $100 million for poor leukemic children. Autumn brought the long-awaited news. Emma in complete remission. The celebration was bittersweet, celebrated in Marcus's bed as he smiled with pure joy. In the last days, Marcus confessed the final secret. He had initially come to return medicines stolen from the hospital, ready for prison. But seeing Emma alone, he had chosen to stay, keeping the promise to Michael. Marcus Washington died at dawn on a Thursday in November, exactly 1 year after that night, when Victoria had discovered him crying in Emma's room. His last hours were serene, surrounded by what had become his family in every sense except legal. Emma and Jamal held his hands, singing softly in English and that Detroit dialect. Victoria watched in silence, keeping her pain for later, knowing Marcus needed to see them strong. Marcus's last words were for the girls, whispered in that mix of languages that had become their family code. He told them to stay united always, to remember that love knows no boundaries of blood or race, to grow strong and kind. To Victoria, he asked only one thing: to tell both the complete story when they were old enough, including the mistakes, the moral compromises, the impossible choices that love sometimes requires. The funeral was immense and intimate at the same time. Hundreds of people came to pay tribute, from the clinic children Marcus had entertained with his stories, to the neighborhood families who had come to know him in recent months, to industry magnates Victoria had convinced to contribute to the foundation. But the most touching moment was when Emma and Jamal went up together to speak. They didn't read prepared speeches. They spoke from the heart, alternating between proper English and street dialect, translating for each other. They told about two fathers who had saved each other through time. Michael, who had saved Marcus. Marcus, who had saved them. They spoke of how a sick janitor had taught a billionaire what it meant to be a mother, of how true love is measured not in what you possess, but in what you're willing to sacrifice. The years that followed saw the Hamilton estate transform into something completely different. Not physically, the designer furniture remained, luxury was intact, but in the soul of the place. Victoria had drastically reduced business travel, discovering that being present for school plays, math homework, the adolescent crises of her two children, because Jamal was her son in every way now, was worth more than any billion-dollar acquisition. The Michael Marcus Foundation became an international model, saving thousands of children across America. Emma and Jamal grew up together, united by a bond that went beyond siblings. When they graduated together in medicine, Emma specializing in pediatric oncology, Jamal in pharmaceutical research, Victoria sat in the front row with 2 white roses on empty seats beside her, for the fathers who had made it all possible. In her graduation speech, Emma spoke of how family isn't defined by DNA, but by the choices we make every day. She told, for the first time publicly, the story of the man who sold pieces of himself to buy medicines, who chose to die so others could live. Jamal added that true medicine wasn't just in molecules and protocols, but in the love that transforms sacrifice into hope. 20 years after that fateful night, Victoria, now 70 but still vigorous, sat in the mansion's garden watching her grandchildren play. Emma had 3 children, Jamal 2, and all called Grandma the woman who once measured her worth in billions. On the living room wall was a photo of Marcus and Michael, taken in that Cedars-Sinai clinic where it all began. 2 men smiling despite chemotherapy, united by a friendship that would change everyone's destiny. The Marcus Washington Theater, built in the mansion's garden, hosted weekly shows by neighborhood children, but also small patients from nearby hospitals. On the entrance plaque, it read, "Where every child is a star, and every sacrifice becomes love." In the evenings, when the house finally quieted, Victoria often found herself in the room that had been Marcus's, now transformed into a library and music room. On the shelves were the journals he had kept, that Jamal had transcribed, pages and pages of a man who noted every smile from Emma, every progress from Jamal, every moment stolen from death. The last entry, written the day before he died, simply said, "Today, Emma laughed. Jamal ran in the garden. Victoria had dinner with us instead of working. I didn't save the world, but I saved our little world. It's enough. It's more than enough. It's everything." And indeed, Victoria thought, looking at the family photos that now filled every available surface, it was everything. A sick black janitor from Detroit had done what all her billions never could have done: transformed a house into a home, 2 sick children into siblings, a billionaire obsessed with success into a mother. He had proven that true love isn't measured by what you possess, but by what you're willing to give. Marcus Washington's story became legend in the medical community and beyond. The extreme example of how paternal sacrifice could transcend blood bonds, how love could be born in the most unlikely places, between the most different people. Medical ethics professors used it as a case study, though all agreed that no theory could completely capture the moral complexity of a man who sold organs to buy medicine for a child who wasn't his. But for Emma and Jamal, who now saved lives every day in their respective fields, Marcus wasn't a case study. He was simply Papa Marcus, the man who had cried for them in the darkness, who had chosen to die so they could live, who had taught them that true love asks nothing in return except to be passed on. And every night, before sleeping, both still whispered that lullaby from old Detroit that Marcus sang to them, passing it on now to their own children, keeping alive the memory of a man who had transformed pain into love, sacrifice into hope, and a tragedy into an imperfect but real miracle. Because in the end, this was Marcus Washington's lesson, that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin with tears shed in secret for someone who isn't even your child. That true love is measured not by what we take, but by what we give. And that a family can be born anywhere, even between a dying black janitor and a rich white girl, united by the invisible thread of 2 fathers who had saved each other through time. The Hamilton estate continued to live, resonating with laughter and tears, with different backgrounds and intertwined stories. And somewhere, perhaps, Michael and Marcus watched satisfied at their masterpiece. A family born from pain, but cemented by love, living proof that miracles exist, even if sometimes they come dressed as tragedy and knock on the door at 2 in the morning when we least expect them. Like, if you believe love knows no boundaries of blood or social class, comment with the moment that touched your heart. Share to honor those who sacrifice everything to save a child. Subscribe for more stories of impossible love and everyday miracles. Sometimes those who serve us in silence are saving our lives. Sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the one we're born into. And sometimes it's enough to enter the right room at the right moment to discover that love was there, hidden in the tears of someone we don't dare to look at.